Hello, this is Real World Audio, and today we are looking at how our RIAA correction works and what does this process do to the information that's stored on your vinyl for the long play records. And I think it's really high time to go through this process to see what it does to the signal, because there's a lot of confusion about this process, and it's kind of obvious that there's a lot of confusion because people don't really know exactly what this process is, and uh, and I got from Hooves Mr. Groove this comment, and which is a really valid comment that that he commented on this video that I recently made. And in that video, I advocated that opinion of mine that you can get the best quality recording, the best fidelity recording, when you just have your microphone input. You don't do any sort of modifications to that. You don't do any tailoring, and you just send that signal to the to your media that you are recording with. And of course he's saying that it's not correct that in that case that exact signal is going to be on your media that you are recording. No, not by a long shot. However, what he's thinking, that in the case of vinyl you have a problem that you don't have with other formats, and that's not true. So even when we are using this direct recording technique, that we are not doing anything, any alteration to the signal, it doesn't matter how we record it, whether we put it on a master tape, on a reel-to-reel machine, or whether we export it to a direct metal master to vinyl directly, or we make a digital recording out of it. All of these processes, all three, require a change, a conversion that enables us to record in that media. So in the case of let me see, the reel-to-reel tape, so when you are doing a reel-to-reel master, even in that case it has to go through an EQ, and it's called the NAB filter. It's not the RIAA but the NAB, which is the same as the early Columbia filter. So yes, so the same filter that is used for the master tapes was also used for the older Columbia recordings, which we also call as LP, but technically it did not use the RIAA curve, but it used the NAB curve, the same as the tapes use. But that thing is also a curve, just like an EQ curve, just like the RIAA, just uses different pole frequencies. And so both of these cases, whether it goes directly to a master tape or to a vinyl, or in this case the metal master, there is an EQ involved, which is an obligatory EQ. However, there is no additional EQ which is processing the sound to further than that's absolutely minimally required to enable us to use that media. Because if there was no NAB correction or no RIAA, inverse RIAA correction, we would not be able to use vinyl or master tape as a media. So without RIAA correction, onto a record size disc, instead of 30 minutes, we would be able to fit 30 seconds of material if we wanted to record down to 20 hertz. And if you think that with digital we ace the process because we don't have to do this correction process, you are right and you are wrong at the same time. because indeed we do not need to EQ the material. However, we need to convert it. So that's the difference between these two processes. Is the correction is kind of like going to the bank, and then they adjust your money based on the amount of whatever loans, mortgages, whatnots you have, and they adjust your money to reflect the actual value of the money you have. Or there's the inflation going on, and your money, what you can buy for it is maybe like 11% less than what you expected to buy with that money. That's the correction that we are doing for vinyl or master tape. But in the case of digital, what we are doing is converting it to a very different currency. So it's like converting your dollars to rubles, and that might be a good idea, or sometimes, like now, it might be a really terrible idea. But that's what's going on, because then instead of an analog format, you are converting it to a digital format. And there's debates of that can be done, which is the least alteration to the signal, changing the EQ, which we are going to reverse later on during the playback, or moving it to a completely different domain, which we are also going to reverse with our DAC, with our digital to analog filter. However, there is like great debates that are done that which process is the least invasive to the original material. And both of these processes have their own strength and weaknesses. However, the very peculiarity about it is that when you look at the end result, then in both the case of digital and analog as well, in vinyl as well, you do have the exact same level at frequencies below 40 Hertz as the ones that were recorded. So yes, when we cut into a lacquer, then the low frequency material will be represented with a much lower dB value signal than what hit the microphone. It's not minus 24 dB. We will see exactly how much. It's a little bit less than that. Even at 20 Hertz, it's much less than 24 dB. But the thing is that during the conversion that your phono stage does, when you are reading out the signal, this conversion will be changed, will be undone. So this is not going to affect the bass response coming from your turntable. And it's mentioned that add some compression, otherwise it sounds awful. And no, there is no compression added to the signal. Compression is when you change the relationship of a soft signal versus a loud signal at the same frequency. And in the process of the RIAA conversion, both soft and both loud sounds are diminished by the exact same amount. And during the RIAA conversion, when you undo this change, both the soft signal and both the loud signal will be restored to where they were. So there is no compression in the process. And however, I think what he's hinting at is that some companies decided to do compression on top of all of these processes, and that's why I was advocating against compression, because compression takes away from the naturality of the music. However, compression is applied a lot, and in the digital era, compression is used much more frequently than it was used during vinyl recording era, because today unfortunately, we are getting lower and lower efficiency loudspeakers and poorer and poorer quality mainstream playback. So nowadays people want to listen to their cell phones, and that just brings with itself a massive drop in general quality. And even though usually we are trying to maintain, or not we, but the recording studios are trying to maintain a high textural resolution, but the dynamic compression is generally getting higher and higher when you sample the decades. So as you go more towards our day, we are seeing a greater general level of compression. And before we go, let me just like this comment. So here we go. So whatever, I have already mentioned this. Eventually where I wanted to go is here. So here we see the curve of what the inverse RIAA correction does to your record. So this is that curve. So what are we seeing here? From 20 kilohertz to 20 hertz. That's the x-axis. And the y-axis center is 0 dB. And here when we go down, it means cut. So we are cutting 5 dB, 10, 15, 20 dB. And we're going up, it means we are adding 5, 10, 20, 15, 20 dB. So basically, what happens is that here is the microphone. So we are recording the singing, recording the music. And then here is the cutter head. Between the two, there is first an inverse RIAA filter. And what it will do is that its reference will be the 1 kilohertz signal. So when there's a 1 kilohertz signal like that's hitting the microphone, then the filter, which is a passive filter, isn't doing any alteration to the amplitude of the signal. Now, if it's higher than that, like 2000 hertz, like then I just woke up the cat, then it's going to boost the signal. And this is something that people generally forget about it. So RIAA is not only cutting down the low frequencies, but it's also boosting the highs. And actually this has a lot of advantage. I'm going to touch on this later on. So even though the RIAA curve that we use is a compromise that was invented in order to be able to squeeze low frequency material onto a record, but it also has an upside, and the upside is that the high frequency material is stored at if we would say it at a modern language, at a much higher information density than the rest of the material. So basically the RIAA, the bonus, the benefit is that on the record the high frequency material has a much added, much elevated representation. So it means that the quality at which the high frequency is stored on an LP is very high, very dense. It's kind of like, if we were talking about digital, it's like having a much higher bit rate for high frequency. So if our average rate was like 16 bit, then for high frequency we have 24 bits or even higher. And then for the bass, the bit rate is dropping down to maybe something like 12 bits. And there is something there with this bitrate change. It's not a bitrate change, but most people today understand this better because everyone is familiar with the bit concept and the information density concept. So what this kind of storage does is that the high frequency material is stored with additional information. And that's something really good because our ears are very sensitive at this high frequency range. And this is what we naturally want. We want the most information to be the most precise, most accurate, most informative in this region, which determines all the dimensionality, all the detail perception, all the timing. So every calculation that the brain does to fine tune the location where the sounds are coming from comes from this part of the frequency range, and that's the strength of vinyl. And now here we see if we drop like below 200 hertz, so at 200 hertz we are at like minus 6 dB cut, and when we go below that, then it rapidly starts to fall down. So the information density where we store the low frequency is getting less and less. And is that a big problem or not? And I would say that by itself, if this level where we are recording the 0 dB level is just barely adequate, then when we hit here, this is not going to cut the mustard. However, if the 0 dB level is already recorded at a very high information density level, then if you drop this level, then that mirrors our hearing or brain processes, because the human ears processing capacity or brain's processing capacity also rapidly declines below 500 hertz. So this part of the curve, the entire lower bass, mid bass, upper bass, and lower mid-range region, it's processed by a tiny part of the human auditory system. It's almost, when you autopsy the brain, that region that takes care, that processes this information is almost nothing. It's a negligible part of the brain. The vast majority of the brain, over 90%, that part of the brain that processes auditory input, deals with this range of the frequency. And this conversion process that was originally invented out of sheer necessity just to enable storing music on a record, by coincidence it also matches the requirements for human hearing. And yes, it's not going to look best on your oscilloscope and your computers will think that, okay, we are storing less information at low frequency than at high, and that's the check mark. Yes, we are storing much less information. However, our brains require that high information density right here where we are getting it, and our brain can't really do much with sounds under 50 hertz anyway. So when we are going to 20 hertz, the brain is really poorly equipped to do any sort of calculation with those inputs that we are getting in that frequency range. And however, this is just the case for storing the media, so basically how much information we are getting, because when we are listening at our to our records, then the RIAA filter is doing this sort of inversion to the signal that we receive from your cartridge, from your turntable. So basically it's going to apply an 18 dB boost at 20 hertz, and the original was an 18 dB cut. So the two will snap to the line and we will receive a 0 dB signal at the same level that came from the microphone. And you see the curves intersected at 1 kilohertz where nothing is happening to the signal, and then your phono stage is going to cut down the signal from the high frequencies. And the rest, what you are hearing, not what you are hearing it, but what the phono stage puts out, will be a flat 0 dB line. So the same that was recorded by the microphone. Well, it's not perfectly the same because all the phono stages have a tolerance. And today, I would say every high quality phono stage is within 0.2 dB tolerance from the line. So basically, you are getting within 0.2 dB of what was originally recorded with the microphone. And that's true at 10 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, 1 kilohertz, 50, and even at 20 hertz. So nothing is getting compromised by this process in the frequency domain. However, there's another aspect that he mentioned, which is very important, is the stylus jumping all over the place. So what does that refer to? That refers to a different aspect, which is related to the requirement to cut the low frequency material to much smaller signal size than was recorded, and that's that when you have a low quality turntable system, a very low quality, or I would say junk cartridge that doesn't cut the mustard, then when it hits high signal level, then it's unable to read it properly and will start to bounce all over the place. So you are not getting a clean signal. And that's also called tracking ability of your stylus. So if the tracking ability of your stylus is very poor, then it will be unable to play low frequency sounds. But that's not because vinyl is a media that cannot play 20 Hz sounds or even lower than that. It is a media that records sounds down even to DC. So yes, the NAB curve that they use for master tape, and it's on Columbia Records, it records and reproduces down to DC. And whether your stylus can read it out or not is really a question of what is the quality of your gear. The quality of consumer gear in the 70s, 80s was insufficient to read high levels of material below 40 Hz. Yes, that's correct. But today, even the lowest grade of acceptable cartridges, even if you just take the cheapest grade O cartridge, I never heard it mistrack bass notes because they are low in frequency, like 30 Hertz or below. So I've seen like dozens of turntable setups, and I never seen any of them mistrack. So if you have a proper turntable with a proper cartridge, that issue that the stylus is unable to track low frequency material is not happening today. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope it helped everyone to get a little bit cleaner picture of what is happening with RIAA correction. Have a wonderful day. Please like, subscribe, and watch my other videos because there's a ton of them. Bye bye.